Why are you here in this team? What do you pursue? What's giving you energy while you're working here? And typically when we start clustering and summarizing those questions, they map pretty perfectly to what we have analyzed.
Holding their hands, transferring the know-how, communication is key. It's very important. Having the communication aspect even before starting off with anything, all along the journey would make it successful and reaching more alignment than misalignment.
It's interesting how they understand that the needs of the company or the context of the company has changed since the time they founded companies, and so this is a very different world.
People are the most consequential and dangerous forces on earth. Well, personality psychology is about the nature of human nature. It's about people. And wouldn't that be useful to know?
The Science of Personality podcast, brought to you by Hogan Assessments.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Science of Personality, in person, on video, and here in beautiful Miami, Florida. Today, we're joined by Rene Kusch, CEO at Relevant Managementberatung, based out of Germany, Seniora El-Hage, who is the Deputy CEO at Phoenix Consulting, which covers the Middle East and North Africa, and also Victoria Zapata, who is the CEO at HRTools in Mexico. And today we're going to talk about the inside of personality, which Hogan measures with its motives, values, preferences, inventory assessment. But before we get to that, Rene, Seniora, Victoria, so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? You know what, Victoria, let's start with you.
Oh, I'm so happy that you said that to start with me, because I am celebrating our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yes, with Hogan, and this is a great opportunity to tell you that it's changed my life.
Aww.
Personally and professionally, and the lives of so many people that rely on our services. And I've seen stories very, very interesting about how do they apply Hogan in their lives, not only professionally, but in personal. So I think that's the one thing that I would like to share with you. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
That's beautiful, because truly our assessments, although designed for work, I think people can get a lot and apply a lot of that in their personal life. So it's a beautiful description.
I've seen it, and in my house, for example, with my husband, we do have our Hogan, so we know each other pretty well, and we know where we strive and where we struggle, and that's something I'm not going to talk about it right now.
I know. I bring it up. My wife and I have seen each other's, and anytime I bring it up, she tells me, we're not going to talk about that today, sweetheart. So, Seniora, for you, tell us a little more.
First, thank you, Blake, for having us. I'm very honored. I'm very pleased to be part of this podcast, first and foremost. Second, definitely, in beautiful Miami. Just a quick, maybe a highlight, since we're talking about the inside of the personality. So us at Phoenix Consulting, as a leadership team, our highest scale is affiliation. And this proves our long-lasting partnership with Hogan and representing it well in the MENA region. So this is what I just wanted to highlight on.
Well, we're pleased to have you here as well.
Thank you.
And Rene, how about you?
Nothing to add to both ladies with regards to what we do with the Hogan Assessments, but perhaps a fun note, which I typically don't share in public. Of course, we are from Germany. I grew up in Germany, but I also grew up in Tanzania for the first 3 years of my life. So I think that's part of my DNA, and therefore I'm really happy to also being here today in Miami with all of the colleagues all around the globe. So good to be here, and let's see what we are going to do for the next 3 days.
We're happy to have you. This is going to be a fun group. I think whenever people think of our assessments and the people who know a lot about them, the HPI, of course, it's kind of the flagship, but you start talking about the dark side, maybe that's the most provocative. But to be honest, it all comes down to values. I like knowing about what gets people out of bed in the morning. So I'm excited to talk about that here today. But last thing, how are y'all enjoying Miami so far?
That's
great.
Beautiful.
It's warm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I can
people
live
love-
here. Maybe if you need
Okay.
a distributor in Miami.
I already asked if Peter Berry was going to take it from Ireland and just keep moving over and see if he was going to get here to maybe open a Miami location, but he got a kick out of that. So
I went to Fort Lauderdale yesterday. I went to Fort Lauderdale yesterday.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, I spent the day. It was beautiful as well as Miami. So
Yeah,
I'm so excited
yeah,
to
the
be
food's-
here with
food's
all of you, my
fantastic.
friends. Yeah, fantastic place. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's get to it. So, because all of you come from different regions in the world, could each of you describe how you explain the Hogan motives, values, preferences inventory to new prospects or clients, and what seems to work best for you? We're all describing the same thing, but maybe we describe it a little bit differently, or maybe it works better to say it a different way. So Rene, let's start with you on this one.
I always put it into context, and the context are the two other assessments by Hogan. So I like to say the HPI is how you fit to the function.
Great.
The MVPI is how you fit to the culture, and the HTS, this derailment assessment, is helping us understand why people leave the company at some point of time.
Oh,
I
great.
also like to add, while we talk in the MVPI perspective about how do I fit to the culture nowadays, we add something which is how do we add to the culture, because the majority of our clients, they're not interested to continuing the culture which has been there for the last 15 to 150 years. But of course, they have a shift in their strategy, and they wonder with candidates in a recruiting situation, for example, well, how is someone fitting to the past while not forgetting about the future and adding to the future culture of the company?
That's a great point. Because culture may have been developed by, upper level executives who aren't going to be there forever. But those people who are coming in, they are actually adding to the culture because they are the ones who could elevate and become the next leadership, and that trickles down to the rest of the organization. So I love that. Seniora.
Yeah, so on top of definitely what Rene mentioned, I always start in a simplified manner by saying that the MVPI are what drives you to get up in the morning, to go to work, to live your life, and so on. In terms of organization, the MVPI could be considered the architecture of the organization.
Oh, I love that.
So it's kind of the foundation of the organization as a whole company or as an organization by itself. How people would fit in is whether they share those same values, those same drivers as the organization would definitely increase the performance of the whole organization. In addition to that, I have a beautiful thing that I always use. It's the MVPI are the hidden KPIs. So on top of how you behave, on top of what are your derailers, what are your skills and competitive advantages, you have the values that are a core in your development, in your promotions, and in how you thrive, how you work as a leader, what you portray or you relate to your team. So those are the KPIs of any person that would help them grow in the organization.
Great. Victoria?
It's great to hear you both, because that's the formal part of it, and I'm not gonna say the same thing, but in my case, when I'm talking with my customers or prospects, I tell them this is the gas of the action. So for me, it's something very simple. Sometimes people is not so aware of the technical issues, and they don't get it on the first time. After so many years, I've learned that even though this is beautiful academically, and we can talk about a lot of things about it, sometimes people don't grab the idea. Right. And then what I do is like to translate that into a very, let's say, familiar way to understand it. And when I say it's the gas for the action, they get it instantly. Because, okay, now I get it. Like it's the way that the things that you put your energy in. Why do you wake up every morning? What do you do unconsciously? Why do you approve a project or not? Where do you go to, let's say, a new market or not? I mean, that's the reason why you do the things you do. That's the way I explain it, and I think that it's very easy for them to grab it, and then because it's something not tangible, right. Like an HPI, you can see it in front of, very naturally, and the HDS, of course, sometimes. But how do you explain MVPI without showing it?
This is why I mentioned the KPIs, and those are hidden KPIs that you cannot see.
Yes, but the thing that I love that the definition that you just mentioned, but the thing is that sometimes people the first time they listen to it, they don't get it.
Yeah.
So that's why I tell them, well, that's one of the ways, but that's the other way that I tell them is like the basis of the crime. Let me. It's like I forgot the word, but it's just what is hidden that takes you to do something.
Unconscious.
Yes, the unconscious part of the crime.
Can I add to this?
Yeah.
By all means.
I love the way how you put it, and you say, well, this is where I put energy in because I think this is meaningful, or I expect that it's going to provide me with value and purpose, and also where I'm getting energy out of it because the result is going to lead to something which is meaningful for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love this. This is why I like to ask this question, is because, I mean, 3 beautiful answers, but not all the same, but all right as well too. I mean, and they're just the way you do it. I was just curious to hear it from the way you all explain it to people in your region. So this is great. Moving on to my next question. So, how do leaders' values influence their leadership style, especially in how they set direction or reward behavior? We're going to start with you, Seniora.
So basically, that's a very interesting question because, as we all know, everything comes from the top and goes down to the bottom. So if the leader is high on a particular scale in the MVPI, he would tend to reward people on the same scale. So if somebody in our part of the world, most of the people are high on recognition and power. So sometimes it backfires on the people who are not high on those 2 scales, for instance. On the other side, on the better side, because most of the people are high on recognition and power, you'll have a lot of talent. So, and then how would you select which are the best fit? So it's a double-edged sword, but it definitely influences whom the leaders would select to go next in line to get promoted on top of their KPIs, their competencies, and their skills.
Great.
Thank
Victoria, how about you?
Thank you. I think this is very important because we've seen leaders in Mexico. We have a trend to have them high power on a leadership role. No, so yes, it's like I go for it. It's like they push their teams to get towards what they are willing to. So but on the other side, there is also industries. And in some industries, for example, they're more prone to be like scientific, for example. That's one of the scales. And they want to do everything with numbers. So the leader pushes everybody to do that on that way. Mm-hmm. And he seems to be the right person to tell them which way to take. It's unconscious. So they just take them there. And sometimes they fail, sometimes they strive. It all depends, but they push the people to do what they think it's good for the company or for their role or for what the team or team or whatever. No, so I think that's what I've seen. The leader is pushing people to do what he thinks is the best way to do it.
And Rene, what about you?
One way of defining or explaining the MVPI perspective, the values perspective, which I really like, is to say, my values help me understand what I find good or bad. And if we are honest or transparent, which of course we are, and at the end, people in more senior positions, it's not so much about the way how they act in that very moment, but in the majority of cases, they are part of decision-making committees or groups of people. Mm-hmm. And the value perspective, basically, and this is hard to show because there's a microphone in the middle of my face, but it helps us understand what's the frame.
Yeah.
Where do I want to have people who are going to act, who are going to perform? And the frame also helps us understand where do I want to have people move, and when is it outside of boundaries which I typically do not tolerate or accept. for example, in the way how I'm recruiting individuals. And the MVPI really helps understand in that person's autopilot mode, what's the frame which I bring to the table in order to make decisions about who's going to join the company or the team and who's not going to join. How are we going to invest resources, especially with high scores on power and commerce, for example. And what it really helps is, if we apply it with people in senior management positions, is that the candidate or the person in charge can reflect on what that person's frame is by automatism, by that person's DNA, as we like to say, and then wonder, well, is this framework, is this the mandate I have in the position I'm taking care of? Very often, there's a great overlap. Sometimes not every single piece is an overlap with my mandate. And then the question is, am I willing and am I able to make decisions outside of my personal frame because it's for the better, it's for the good of that specific company? And I think there's a lot of examples which we are going to cover, which might be good examples. So I'm shutting up right now.
Okay, yeah. No, don't spoil anything for the rest of the interview. So, okay. How do you use the MVPI to help teams understand what motivates them and how that shows up in team dynamics? And Rene, let's go right back to you.
So typically in team conversations, what we do is we have participants go through the Hogan, we aggregate the data, and we analyze the data, and we have this handy in order to have conversations with the team in all kinds of ways. One special kind of way which we apply to the MVPI, the values perspective, is that we are not only aggregating and calculating mean and deviations, but we also basically calculate how often a specific scale. It's a little bit technical, but still you have asked that question. How often the scales in the MVPI are rank order 1, 2, or 3. Okay. We find this more meaningful because mean scores typically don't consider the level differences in the MVPI profile. So basically what we have is we have a good understanding after calculating this, which of the 10 scales are highest with regards to top 1, 2, or 3. And we typically also map this with a very, very, very simple exercise at the very beginning of starting this conversation, which is, well, why are you here in this team? What do you pursue? What's giving you energy while you're working here? And typically when we start clustering and summarizing those questions, they map pretty perfectly to what we have analyzed with the Hogan results up front, so in the preparation. But still, we have two pieces of info where we then can use the language which the participants in the team session have already shared in order to then have continue the meaningful conversation about the team profile. And then, of course, going back to the question, well, what are your individual frames? What's the mean frame, the mean for the team, the frame for the team? And then again, what's the mandate, what's ahead of you? And how is that going to help you? Or how is that going to perhaps even hinder you making good decisions for the future?
Excellent. Seniora.
Yes. So basically using the team's data in the MVPI in specific, first of all, provides with a self-awareness for the whole team in general, how well they work together, what drives them as a team, what motivates them, and what makes them good performers because they share those same scales on the high end. And on top of that, as a team, how well they fit within the culture and within the aspirations and within their leaders' motivators, values, preferences, scales as well. So it all goes back not only to them as individuals, them as teams, and sometimes you have different teams, but all those teams are working to achieve the organizational objectives that also stem from the values that the leaders are, projecting in the organization. So it's a cycle that is really important. Again, we go back to the importance of the MVPI and the values, the motives that some people, as Victoria mentioned, don't understand or might think that those are like additions to the really important stuff is how you behave and your derailers. On the contrary, and it's a very accurate saying when we tell them this is the inside of the personality. So from the inside, everything stems outside. So I hope maybe I diverted a bit, but from the question. But as individuals and as teams, the MVPI is really very important for the operational and performance and the efficiency, operational efficiency and performance of the organization.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Victoria.
I think they said everything, but I have a very good
make an
example of,
yes.
because we follow the same path. Let's say having the Hogans and then the aggregation and the reports and the same steps, let's say. But I was thinking also about different companies that are larger. And sometimes we do a team, we work with a team or the leadership team, and then we start doing all of this analysis with different areas, for example. And then sometimes we find some commonalities. Most of the time, let me go one thing, and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
And also within cultures, let's say there's companies we serve that are located in different regions of the country. So then sometimes the region on this side of the country is a little bit different than the region on the other, but there are commonalities within the teams. So I think it's beautiful to find out with numbers and to find with the reasons why this team is not getting along with this team. Because the people from that region is not whatever, and the people from this region is yes, whatever. So I think that it's the more you know the values of the company, not only in one team, like a small team, which is beautiful to work and talk with them, but when you aggregate all the information from all these places, it's a lot better to understand why things are happening the way they are doing it in the region. So I think it's like going from the steps, like what we did, just talking about it, and I think that it's very interesting to see what drives these people or what doesn't drive these ones.
And so I'm gonna, if I'm supposed to be the resident storyteller, for Hogan, a quick little story on my end that I've had to learn, because I don't technically manage anybody internally at Hogan, but I have two external PR teams that I manage, across, I do U.S. and Latin America, but then I also have Europe. But one of these two teams, and I haven't told them this. I don't know if they're going to watch this video or not. but what I've noticed, and I don't share too much, because even though I have direct conversations with their boss, I even tell them, I've said, hey, our conversation is confidential, and your boss, you could tell me anything, and that your boss is never going to hear anything about it. However, there was one thing where when looking at the MVPI, and I do the feedbacks for each of these people on the team. That's kind of where I get some of my practice for fun, and but also to help them learn, because they're going to present Hogan and try to get us in the media and things like that. They need to know more about what they're pitching. And so what I noticed is that this team was high recognition across the board. I am about as low as you can go. What I found, and I told their bosses, the only thing I shared with them out of the confidential thing, I was like, because the boss shared it too, I was like, this team is high recognition. That means they kind of need to know when they do well. And so even though for me, it makes me uncomfortable, so I don't always think to recognize people. I think whenever they do a good job, I'm not even answering the email, but to me, I'm like, this is great, but I don't tell them. So I made a conscious effort to be flexible and make sure that they know every time they do something good that exactly. I am rewarding them with a nice note, telling them they're doing a great job. They killed it this week, all of that. And the results in that is great work.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really enjoyed seeing it. So that was just something that I got to see from a personal level that kind of meant a lot. But whenever I started doing it, their boss sent me a separate email and said, I see what you're doing here. So,
Blake, there's even, again, an exercise tied to this, because in that very situation, you had the beauty of having the Hogan data for those candidates or for those people. Sometimes bosses, they don't have the Hogan assessment results for the people reporting into them.
Right.
So what we sometimes do, and when we are debriefing bosses, people in charge, we say, well, do you have on your radar, similar to what you just shared, that most likely people reporting into you, they don't have the similar values, the similar value profile, and they say, of course I do. So the question is, how are you consciously working around this? One exercise which works pretty well, even though it's really pragmatic as well. Go through the definitions of the values in the value report.
Okay.
Have the names of the people reporting to you in the back of your head, and then for each of the people who's reporting to you, at least find one scale, one value, where you expect where you predict that this is something meaningful for them, even though it might not be for you. And I literally make them write it down and ask them after the conversation to just test it, similar to as you did, and they typically share similar stories.
Yeah, it's really powerful, isn't it? Yeah, I mean it works. Stuff works.
I was thinking Rene is right. Sometimes the manager or the boss doesn't take the MVPI scores and look at them. And on top of that, even sometimes when they do have the report at hand, leaders and managers tend to look only at the scales that matter to them on their own high scales unconsciously, because they want to see whether this person would fit in or not. But I agree with you. If they have hired the people, they're over the selection process and they're looking at the reports, it's important to appreciate them and provide them with the push that matters to them, or the value and the MVPI scores that are high. So yeah,
I was thinking about a company that had two leaders that were very well. They were doing very well. However, their relationship was broken.
Oh.
So then, when we started, we have their Hogan. So we had. Well, I told them, what do we see on the values? What's going on with them? Because they're very good executives, both of them. So when we started looking at the results, they were so different that they were not able to get along. So they were good, they were great, but the problem was that they had to depend on each other to perform the job. But there was like a constant fight, struggle, problems, and they say, why is this happening? Because both of them are very knowledgeable in what they do. Both of them are very experts. Everything was working well, even their HPI or CS. The drivers were the things that were not helping them to get along. So there was this struggles with these two leaders, and then it permeated to the teams. And it was horrible because the teams were listening to some wordings from each of the leaders talking about the other leader. They had to work together, but there was no way to reconcile. So we spoke to them, they got it, they understood it. But however, this is not a very successful story. One of them had left because he said, there's no way for me to work with this guy. So he left. So I think that's why it's so important. The mobile of the crime is the word that I was forgetting on the first.
There you go.
That was the word, because that's why he left. Talking about teams, no.
Okay, so we're gonna move on from teams now. How have you seen MVPI data influence how a company defines its leadership culture? And Victoria, when do you want to take this one?
Well, for sure. I think that I have worked with different teams, and I remember most of them have like anchors. Let's say they share one or two values or some. But at one time, I found a team that had no anchors.
Okay.
It was very strange for me to find. Oh my God! I thought it was like some of them shared things, of course, but there was not a real.
When you say no anchors,
not
all
a
of
common.
Them low or no common?
No common.
No common. Okay.
No common drivers within the team. It was good, but it was very strange. It was a challenge for me.
Yeah.
How am I going to coach this? Because they didn't. I mean, some of them did, yes, and so I think that was very challenging, because there were no, and the company was not that new. It was not something that new people they were forming the team or whatever. No. So that was very interesting, because there had some other things on other parts of the assessment of their personalities that held them. But when I've seen the groups or teams that have a common ground, they flow. They flow. They go with the rhythm. They understand each other. This is the way we do things here, and so But in this other team that I found, they were, let's say, very happy with what everybody was doing, but like in silos.
Yeah.
It was like your stuff, my stuff. And we get together, we work together, and then we go.
Yeah.
It was so interesting to see that, because that was I think I remember that's the first time that I've seen that there was nothing in common. So with you and me, yes, but you and him, and that was it. There was not a culture, like, let's say. So it was very interesting, and I can see the difference between having a culture that has shared values and having a culture that has no shared values. It doesn't flow the same. They do
Yeah.
perform, but it doesn't feel the same way. People is happy with one thing, but they don't get like a cohesion.
Yeah. And you would imagine if like they were if each of those individuals were all in separate situations, but were with people and they all had those anchors, they would probably be like, this is what this should be like, because it's probably truly a different feeling whenever you're showing up to work, whenever you do share some of those common values with people.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay, Rene, how about you?
I think one thing which I learned over the course of I don't know how many years or perhaps decades working with Hogan in the industry is that I like the saying, there's nothing like a good or bad personality profile per se.
Oh, and that's true.
So there's nothing like a good or bad value system per se. So the question is, in which situations, for which kind of futures is my personality profile, aka my autopilot mode or by my decision-making style, going to make a difference? So my answer to your question would be consciously. Because in some situations, in some challenges, my values are going to help me make good decisions or have good culture. So for example, having high affiliation really helps. Having good relationships with other people and spending time with each other, even though that's not going to be instrumental in that very moment. But also, if my score on affiliation was really high, typically because I want to preserve the relationship which we are building up, it might be difficult to have difficult conversations. I like to call it courageous conversations. So to clarify stuff which might be
Hurting
difficult,
the relationship.
potentially hurting the relationship, and still doing it, but not in a provocative kind of way, but in a way that it might hopefully still preserve the relationship, but not avoiding those kinds of conversations. And of course, that's just a small example, but answer to your question is consciously wondering, how is it helping me in one situation or building up culture, and how might that hinder me through unconscious biases, and then still pursuing it if it's the right way to do. Because on a long-term perspective, again, in that example, if we are not having courageous conversations, for example, how to deal with the restriction of resources, well, someone else is going to make the shot, and then it's going to be outside of our control. And that most typically, that's the least thing we wanna have.
That's just great. All right, Seniora.
Yes, we're seeing these a lot nowadays in the Middle East, especially between Saudi Arabia, mostly the Gulf countries, where the organizations are changing from family-led organizations and conglomerates to more corporate, to from a generation to the next. And here there's the leadership transition, and having new blood in the organization leading and the old blood leaving is where the clash is. Not clash, but a conflict, because we've come through a current client not long time ago, where the values are not shared between the elder person or elder leader and the new one. And here the board comes in and maybe try to find a common ground, and this is what we help them doing, to find a common ground by having somebody who's in charge of the operations, continuing the values that have been shared and that have made the organization grow throughout all those years, and having somebody else, his daughter, taking over in the aesthetics and as secondary, or the values that are not the main drivers that have let the organization reach the way where it is now, because it's a very reputable company. So this is also very important in terms of how leaders also, not only when they're working together, as Victoria was mentioning, and not sharing the same values, but also transitioning from the N to the N-1, the N-1 taking over. So, yeah.
All right. Do you have anything to share, Rene?
Do we have the time?
We do. Absolutely. We're not constrained by time here. Rene, if you have something to add.
I really like the conversation, and I'm happy that it's not the last day of the conversations which we are having, but the very beginning. So looking forward to dinner tonight. But what I find really interesting, Seniora, is the case which you're making, or the example, which is, I think, very, very typical in different regions. That's also applying to Germany, and where we find that there's a lot of friction happening in cases where people don't fit to each other from a values perspective. Mm-hmm. And very often, because people who are in charge, people who own companies, they don't want to have this friction. They have difficulties with different candidates. Thing is, sometimes they don't have an alternative. And again, sometimes if I don't have an alternative, then appreciating that this is part of life, that working together, handing over responsibilities, handing over business to other people, very often those people are not similar like us, unfortunately, because then everything would be perfect. Appreciating just by definition, by default, that there's going to be friction, not because the other person is bad, but because that person has just another upbringing, just other strengths, if you wanted to say, or just other ways how to interpret all kinds of situations. And then facilitating this conversation can help people who are in charge, owning companies, even though the successor is not similar, but different, with a little bit of facilitation around friction in the process of handing over the business, being okay with someone leading the business who is not like myself. And we typically see this connotation of there's nothing like a good or a bad personality profile. If you want to have someone who's going to shape the future, most likely different in the future and that you have done this in the past, it's going to be with friction, not because you are bad, not because the other person is bad or stupid and incompetent, but because it's the way of life to have friction. Right. So we better work it out. And of course, this is not excusing for a significant misfit or miscompetence, but that would be then the other side not the other side of the medal, but the other extreme. Not in every case where we see friction, this is an indication of misfit to the position, I guess. I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Well, and we're glad you said it, Rene. We're not going to worry about the time here.
If I may just add
do
one
it.
thing.
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
I think we're going to stay forever here.
And that's okay.
And this
we'll
is
be
where
here all night. No.
This is where our role comes into play. Yes, the tool is amazing. We have a very solid scientific product in our hands, but having you help them understand better the shortfalls and the drawbacks, and that they need to work on these friction, conflict, whatever we want to call them, and accept the other, would facilitate things and would end result let the organization reach the target, the objectives. However, if not, if they just take those reports and just have a minor or basic interpretation and not having interventions from us as Hogan ambassadors, associates, coaches, if it were just to read those reports on a short term, things would work, but long term things would fail. So this is very important from our end to have this impact by having those tools, like given their weight, as per se.
It is interesting to hear your stories on the region, Seniora, because it's the same thing in Mexico. There are so many family-owned companies, the majority of them, most of them, and they're turning it. Well, some of them are so large that are in very different countries now. And lucky for me, I have relationship with some of those families that are the founders, And we have done the the Hogan assessments within the family. So it's so interesting to see how all generations want to keep on what they say me, Victoria, I want you to help me to keep on the tradition of my company. This is my next generation. I want to understand if which one of my sons, so family members, is going to be my successor or my family successor, whatever. And it's so interesting to see, even though they understand it because they are knowledgeable, they have been learning, organized, they have been organized, let's say, somehow they get it. But at the end, it's interesting how they understand that the needs of the company or the context of the company has changed since the time they founded companies. And so, I mean, this is a very different world.
Right.
So they understand it, but even though they get it, let's do some let's give it some preference to these profiles, but at the same time let's keep this one, which is tradition mostly. So let's keep high tradition because this guy is not he's very innovative, he does things a lot, but it's the same thing that drives us to what we think it's the best way. And that's very internal. So they understand cognitively that they have to move forward, but at the end they want to stay where they are.
Yeah.
So it's like a tension that they are living all the time, and it's very interesting for me to have these deep conversations with them and let them and talk to each of them. I mean, and then to the family all together. Because we have done group, let's say. I was going to say therapy. No, it's not. We have group sessions with the families, with the owners. It's so interesting.
I'd watch that reality TV show. I think that'd be really good.
Very similar.
Yeah. Okay, so a topic that it's been a hot topic, but I think there's still a lot of organizations out there that maybe aren't taking succession planning as seriously as they should. But that's an emphasis. You know, we've looked at that for years and years at Hogan, but we're really looking to emphasize it a little bit more because there is such an opportunity there, and I think that's a market that, although somewhat not tapped nearly deep enough. So, with regard to succession planning, have you ever seen a misalignment in values derail a promising leadership transition? I mean, we kind of talked about it here. And how did that play out? So, Seniora, we're going to start with you here.
Yeah, actually, this is exactly the example that I was talking about 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
However, I have another example. So we have an organization, or let me go one step backwards and say that succession planning is the initiative nowadays in the whole Middle East. So everybody's looking into succession planning. There's more awareness of its importance that down the road they cannot just wake up one day and just allocate any person who does not maybe share the same values, but also is not fit for the job or whatever. So it's a very lengthy exercise that we do, definitely starting with the Hogan Leadership Forecast series, obviously going into these scales and the sub-scales, mapping them to the company's competencies, also looking into the company's values and mapping them to the MVPIs, or mapping the MVPIs to the company values. We are sometimes looking more in depth because of the differences in cultures, because even within the same organization, I would take an example be it in Africa or in Dubai, you have people who are on the lower level applying for the next level or part of this succession planning journey and assessment center and so on, who come from different cultures. Some come, even if they are locals, they come from different regions, thus different cultures, and with all the expats. So it's a very broad topic. There is misalignment sometimes, but it's very important to tackle it from the beginning. Make sure that you're working with the initiative, with them, holding their hands, transferring the know-how. Communication is key. It's very important. having the communication aspect even before starting off with anything all along the journey would make it successful and reaching more alignment than misalignment.
Rene?
So what we are working with a lot of companies which are investors in some kind of way, so private equities and also family offices. And what they are looking for is people who are good in running companies. And whom they typically pick are people who have been good in running companies in all kinds of ways. So highly driven, highly ambitious, high power in the Hogan scales. And typically they're really good in selling themselves in the getting to know phase. And what they're sharing typically after a course of having sometimes even 50% of being unsuccessful, putting someone in a new CEO position, is that they have overdone those behaviors. So not only being ambitious, but being ambitious to an extreme, not pushing. Because of course, if you have a private equity company as an investor in your company, well, you can't wait for 5 years, but you have to perform a little bit quicker. Not only pushing specific business, but doing it to an extreme that people can't do anymore, can't stand it anymore. So those principles, and we see them over and over again. And what we do is basically helping them understand how do those candidates balance what they have been doing in the past and which have helped them being successful dramatically, quickly, being promoted all of the time, quicker than everybody in the peer group, and still not doing it to an extreme that people reporting into them can't stand it anymore. They're falling out, they're sick, they are not concentrated anymore because they're afraid of their bosses. And what I find really interesting is that those principles which we find in those positionings and placements into C-level positions, this is very similar to what Hogan is also referring to when we talk about emergence and effectiveness. So people growing and rising up in the hierarchy of organizations, where of course we want to see and identify people who emerge, because we want to have people who can represent companies also to the outside. But we don't want to forget about people who at the end are effective.
Right.
The difficult thing is that those people who by their nature are good in emergence, so being seen, they're seen no matter the promotion process. Those people who typically are effective, so who worry more about really making a difference in the position they are, they typically don't do so much marketing for themselves. So we want to make sure that we identify those. Yeah. And there's all kinds of processes in place in order to enrich and widen the candidate pool.
For sure. Victoria, do you have one that can top the one from earlier?
Yes, the thing is that it's going to be like the similar story. It's interesting to see that everything is happening the same way in different regions. But I want to talk about the person who is leaving the company.
Okay.
Because he was, in this case, he was the CEO of a very large company, and he used Hogan for their successions, whatever, selection, development, leadership. And then he called me one time and he said, Victoria, I'm retiring and I want to see what's the next step for me. Sorry. I thought that was the bravest man ever, because he didn't have a need to work or do anything. He was just retiring. Well, not just, but he was retiring. And then we went through his profile, and because I didn't know, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this A or B or C, because I am interested, but I have never been on my own, and I need to understand what's going on with me. He was so bright to do that, because he had the chance to know himself better and to understand what the drivers he had, what was all his personality, where was he going to be good at. Because one of the choices he was taking was completely no way to go there. Because if you go that way, you're going to fail immediately because of this and this. Well, it's not that I said him, but it's just that we had a conversation and he got it. And he said, no, Victoria, I know that I'm not gonna take that path. I'm going to go to the other side. And he made a decision on his successor, and he is very, very successful. But he was aware of it. which is the big difference between him and others that are not, that are aware, but they still want to do their own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this person was very fully aware of the implications of taking his own decision instead of listening to the data. And then it was a both sides win-win thing. The person that took his job is very successful, and he is very successful and happy doing what he's doing.
Great.
So I think it's like the tip of, that's my only story I have, because nobody else, everybody's very bold to do that, mostly bold. But in this case, I can feel it like, that's why I was telling you in the beginning, that Hogan has changed lives.
Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think it's because we have a distributor or a network of distributors around the world like this that allows us to kind of show the rest of the world, and we're chipping away at it. We're going to improve this global workforce as best we can. Okay, we're winding this thing down now, so I have a couple questions left. You thought I only had one question left, but I've got two questions left. So surprise. Okay, but for what was going to be my last question, can you share an example of a leader whose values both fueled their success, but also proved to be detrimental in other areas? And we're going to round this one out. Rene, kick this one off.
I truly wonder whether there's an additional perspective to what we have already discussed. And as I speak, I'm making I'm making one up, but I'm coming up with one. It's still in the idea, in the thinking of how do people's careers evolve. We have just recently published data from 1,400 executives in Germany, which is part of a larger study, which is the Global Executive Study, which is going to be published at some point of time through Hogan. And what I found really interesting is that the German executives, they have personality traits which we would describe as being easily able to run transitions.
Okay.
And I personally have worked with all kinds of people in all kinds of leadership positions where I would agree that this is their personality traits or combination of personality traits for those people who are Hogan certified, low prudence, high mischievous, low security, low tradition, for example.
Are you talking about me?
I do.
That is exactly
I know you.
What
I'm a psychologist. And the beauty, coming back to your question, so that's my frame story. The beauty of those profiles is, well, I have no difficulties at all with ambiguity and pushing the limits and testing it in an entrepreneurial kind of way, doing stuff. Very, very often, at least this is how we can interpret the Hogan executive data is, well, this is what gets people promoted in next levels and hierarchies up into the C level. The thing is, the more leadership responsibility I have, or which is entrusted to me, the less it's about me and my personal career, making my area of responsibility, so task functional-wise, successful, but the more I'm responsible for other people, shaping workforce or shaping a culture and helping them being comfortable giving their very best. If I'm low prudent, low security, low tradition, high mischievous, I typically appreciate chaos, not planning in advance, for others not wondering what the consequences of my behaviors are. At least that's how the way how I behave can be described, and potentially missing opportunities to provide psychological safety for others. And I wonder whether, at least in the German market, one of the reasons why resistance to change is such a huge topic is due to the fact that people who have been successful in their past through the ability to deal with change, to go through the transitions really quickly and coming back to the low scores and the value profile. I don't even care about chaos. I don't even care about risks, potentially still not caring or not having it on their radar. Mm-hmm. That for other people, smaller steps, more communication, more risk management, more talking about it would be really, really helpful going through a transition together. And we see that people, Victoria, coming back to your last item or to your last point, who reflect upon themselves, who see how they have been successful, how potentially they don't care about the future. They're just caring about creating them. They're not worrying about potential risks, but understanding that this is very typical for them and that for other people it might look different, typically opens them up for providing a framework, workplace where other people can also be successful through the psychological safety other people typically need more.
You illustrate things really well with the framework.
Do I?
Yeah, I like it. I
I work on this really.
I'm sure
really
you
strong.
do, Rene.
Thanks.
I think it's pretty evident here. Seniora, how about you?
Exactly. He nailed it also to the extent that we don't have much to add. So this takes me to an example more than.
Great, by all means.
So I also came across now, just hearing out Rene, a leader that was really very high on aesthetics. So it was difficult for him to accept any data driven by science and numbers and figures. So anything that was like rational was hard for him to absorb or accept or digest psychologically or emotionally. And down the road, this caused him a lot of hiccups, a lot of downfalls, because you can have values that are high, like aesthetics, but you have to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of where you're standing. And you as a leader, you have to look into other aspects and not go blind and not going the extreme way. So yes, they are important, but yes, they can deteriorate your career, the department you're in, or even the organization on a bigger scale.
Great.
So yeah.
I loved your description, Rene. Thank you for doing that. And I'm going to bring an example as well. Thank you. This was like a leader who has like a high power, as most of us Mexican leaders have. And he rewarded people through challenges. Mm-hmm. But he was a low recognition one. So every time somebody did something outstanding, he said, yes, let's go for it. And then now it's going to be, and there is another layer, no? So he's constantly giving challenges to people. But the people was feeling like we don't even have time to celebrate. So they were moving very fast. They were doing very well. The business was growing, whatever. But the people was very tired because they didn't even have a chance to sit, relax, enjoy, and let's go with the next one.
Was this a hedonistic culture as well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There's some rub there then. There's going to be some friction.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of friction because they were hedonistic, but he was as well a little bit, but not that much. And the recognition was not high as well. But the affiliation was. Mm-hmm. So he was a very nice person, and he loved people. He was nice, but his mindset was motivating people through challenges. Mm-hmm. You got this one, yes, let's go for the next one. And they were, wait, let me rest. Let me breathe.
Yeah.
Until, let's do something before we go to jump to the next one.
Right.
So it was positive in one side, but it was also negative on the other side. So that's the example I wanted to share.
Okay, well, the last question that I want to ask that I didn't really give you all any time to prepare for is just because you all are from different parts of the world, I'm just curious, the business of Hogan and your business and what you see this looking like in the next 5 to 10 years. Victoria, let's go right back to you.
Thank you. I think that it's going to be growing. Why? Because there's more self-awareness. We are seeing that a market, when I started 20 years ago, they didn't even understand what personality was. I'm exaggerating, but kind of.
You're probably right. I think a lot of people 20 years ago, if you really think about it, I think personality, the word's been around for a long time, but to really understand it, I feel like it's been more recent.
Yeah. And recently what I see everywhere is that people is getting worried and occupied about people. So I think whenever we talk about the results that we have gotten with our other people, and they talk with each other. I mean, sometimes many times we get calls from people that doesn't even know us, but they know other customers or whatever stories behind, I mean, old stories or new, but they are looking to improve the companies through people in a genuine way. So what else? I have the last call that I got last 2 weeks ago, let's say, was, Victoria, I don't know Hogan, but I know that's the best thing we can do for our people. So I see a trend on going to, the problem is that most of the times they take the time for leaders, but not as much for the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
I think that there's an opportunity for them to start working in a lower base, let's say, on the hierarchy. Yeah. But yes, general speaking, some people doesn't make any decision if they don't have a Hogan in front of them. The top decisions are made with Hogan. So I think that in our case, for example, I think it's going to be growing. There's some other reasons they don't like to apply it, because it's like, I have to say it, it's cost for them. I mean, it's a different market.
Yeah.
So it's just that's the reason they don't do that more.
Beautiful. Seniora?
Yes, I can see it flying in the next 5 years. There has been a lot of growth for Hogan and the MENA region. It was mostly known in the private sector. For the past 2-3 years, I've seen more demand from the public sector in the Gulf. Again, at the leadership level. However, I can say it's being cascaded down, maybe not till the entry level. We work more on the developmental front, on the leadership level. So mid managers level upwards to the C-suite. I see more and more of it going forward, especially with the Arabic translation of the Leadership Forecast series, which will have a big impact, I think, in Saudi Arabia. With the succession planning, again, that has become the trend and the most important thing in our part of the world. Promotions as well, identification of high potentials. So I think we're growing. Us, when I say us, it means Hogan, and looking forward to more growth.
Well, that particular region feels like it's on the precipice of something really big. Like it's like I can see why you think there's going to be a lot of growth there, because it just seems to make sense, and we're so lucky to have you there to
Thank you.
to
I'd like to add that there is also the challenge of the cost. It's even in the region, because everybody tends to think that, in the Gulf they have money, they spend money. No, it's no longer the case. It's been a challenge last year or 2 or even 3, I would say. Even biggest organizations would bargain and would negotiate and come back saying, give me your last and best offer. And we go back to Hogan sometimes when it's a big volume, as we all do. So no, it's also been a challenge, but the way we answer back is that Hogan is the Rolls-Royce of the personality assessment. So it's not like you can buy a Rolls-Royce and you can buy, I will not name any other brand, but any other brand with all due respect. So we're trying to get there and fly with our Phoenix to reach the peak of Hogan growth in the region.
Well, Rene, there are very few places that make cars better than Germany. So why don't you give us our last answer here? Doesn't have to be car related, but figured I'd point that out.
Used to be, right?
Huh? Yeah, well,
used to be. You're asking a really big question. And with regards to the assessment product by Hogan, I have high expectations about the meeting in Miami and what the Hogan answer is going to be to AI. Because AI is there, the future is going to be AI. not 100%, but the AI part, of course, is going to be way bigger in the future than it is today. And it's I think it's nobody can tell how 5 to 10 years is going to look like. I don't know whether there is one reliable source who says I know how it's going to look like in 3 years from now, because the growth and the change is so rapid. But what I would like to address is the question: how are we going to process the way into the future where nobody knows how this is going to look like?
Right. Yeah.
And then going back to Victoria, I can only highly recommend that we are embracing the mere fact that we don't know how the future is going to look like. Nobody does. But question is, am I sitting here somewhere in my living room and just watch TV and do nothing else than worrying? Or do I prepare? And preparation means, for example, just very pragmatically again, if you don't have a ChatGPT account, get one, even if that's for free, and experiment with it. Yes, you won't figure this out perfectly, but start with it and embrace the fact that you know perhaps maximum 5% of what can be done through AI, but start learning. And of course, we are in this industry of personality assessments. Well, one key factor of me making decisions about me and my future is knowing who am I.
Yeah.
And the value perspective really helps me understand what's important for me and what are routes I want to take into the future and what are action steps necessary in order to prepare for the future. So I would like to encourage everybody listening to wonder, do I know who I am? Do I know where I'm getting my purpose from? And do I go through situations which might be uncomfortable because I don't master this perfectly? But that's the process of learning. Don't shy away from this.
Beautiful. You all, this has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you joining us. So happy to see you here in Miami, and I hope you have a great rest of your trip and enjoy the Hogan International Distributors Summit. So.
Thank
You
you,
already do.
Blake.
Good,
It's always a
good.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that does it for this special episode of The Science of Personality. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Science of Personality podcast, brought to you by Hogan Assessments. You can access all episodes on our website, thescienceofpersonality.com, or on the streaming service of your choice.